How are the local bond and equity markets performing? What are the factors we need to look out for? Find out in today's broadcast. Good morning, AXA. I'm Tin Militante, Advisor Transformation Manager from DLND. Welcome to another episode of Investment News Live. Today, let's look into our local bond and equity markets. We have with us again Investment Strategy and Communications Manager Ramon Domingo to share with us how bond and equity markets are performing locally. He will also zoom into some of the top holdings of our local equity funds. Welcome to the show, Ramon. It's nice to have you here again today.
Thank you, Tin. Good morning, everybody. So for last week's update, we focused on the US, what happened for 2020, and the outlook for 2021. For this week, we'd like to zoom in on the local markets, specifically on the fixed income and equity markets of the Philippines, as well as what will be happening for 2021. So to start, we'll take a look at the local bonds. So local bonds actually had a good performance for the year of 2020 at 7.28%. And this was mainly driven by actions done by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or BSP, where they lowered interest rates throughout the year by a total of 1.75% since the lockdown began, such that the lending rate now sits at 2%. So what this means is that by lowering the interest rate, they aimed to provide relief in the form of easier and cheaper borrowing for people and businesses. And this helped the performance of bonds for 2020. How, you may ask, do interest rates affect the performance of our bonds and our bond funds? When you think about it, the bonds that exist within our bond fund are already existing bonds in the market. So when the BSP lowers rates, they're actually lowering rates for new bonds. And so if you think about it, the lower rates for new bonds actually raises the value of already existing bonds. Therefore, the ones that were already in our fund, they went up in price and value. But apart from that, another reason why our bond fund was able to do well last year was a good strategy that was used by our fund managers at Metro Bank. So our fund managers, once they knew that expectations of a recovery were picking up in the latter half of 2020, because there were more openings, there were less restrictions, and then of course the vaccine news provided that recovery story, they pivoted to shorter term bonds instead of compared to the index or the benchmark, because the rates at the shorter term bonds are more well anchored or safer. So our wealth bond fund was actually able to outperform even its own benchmark for the year at 7.77%. Now our outlook for 2021 is that the BSP will plan to keep rates low, but an eventual economic recovery for 2021 would probably slow down the performance of bonds. So given that's the case for bonds slowing down for 2021, or at least how we see it, we move on to equities to see what we can find for this market for 2021. But first, we have to understand what happened to the market during 2020. So despite having one of the longest and strictest lockdowns early on in the pandemic, the Philippines went on to see one of the biggest rises in COVID cases in the region. And because of that, that caused negative overall sentiment within the Philippine market, which largely caused the underperformance in equities relative to other regions. So the Philippines actually performed at negative 9% for the year. This is because of the risk associated with investing in the region and in the Philippines. However, as you can see in this chart that I'm showing, for the latter part of the year, especially quarter 4, we saw a rebound in equity markets. This is due to the openings and less restrictions, like I mentioned earlier, but mostly driven by good news on the vaccine development, which provided positive investor sentiment and also made people hopeful for an eventual recovery. Now, taking a look on how that translated to the performance of our equity funds, because of the overall performance of Philippine equities, there were actually limited names that performed well. The favorite in the strategy of our fund managers was to go for defensive picks or defensive companies, those that were poised to do well in a pandemic environment, namely the telecom companies such as Globe and PLDT, as they stood to benefit from higher mobile internet usage. And so as you can see, the Spanish American Fund actually performed the best among our equity funds because it has exposure to these kinds of companies. While the most hit sectors such as consumer companies, such as what you can see in the Chinese tycoon, were not able to do so well because of the low demand overall coming from consumers. This year, with a broad market recovery expected, such as what we are seeing in the US, we see equities in general as the ones to perform well compared to bonds. More specifically, the cyclical names and the broader market of the Philippine Equity Index will tend to do well. That's why we tend to like the Wealth Equity Fund as it has the most broad exposure to the Philippine equity market among our funds. So now moving on to our outlook for 2021. The main things that we're watching out for and paying attention to hasn't really changed. First, the better management of COVID cases has helped the recovery and overall investor sentiment. However, what would allow a better recovery for the market is an efficient vaccine rollout. And I stress the rollout rather than the number of vaccine doses that our country is able to receive. So actually, the Philippine government is targeting to procure around 148 million doses of COVID vaccines within this year. And so far, we have secured around upwards of 125 million doses from various companies. Though this is a very good sign, the effective distribution of this vaccine will be critical. We have actually even seen reports of poor distribution even in the US, with a number of doses going bad due to poor storage conditions. So that what we see is actually a potential risk. But we still take this as a good sign nonetheless, but not the end-all, be-all for the pandemic-driven recession. That's why the second factor is also very critical, which is further fiscal stimulus to be deployed. As many Filipinos are still unemployed or experiencing a significant reduction in income and spending, more fiscal stimulus in the form of unemployment benefits and easy lending would help in this regard. So this would contribute in bringing back that consumer demand, which would in turn help with that market recovery. As you can see in this graph that I'm sharing with you, the Philippines is actually lagging other emerging markets in the region in terms of fiscal stimulus provided to the country. So if we are able to up this, and we have very good reason to be hopeful since the 2021 budget was passed very early, if we're able to up this, then we'd be looking at a stronger recovery overall for the Philippines. So to end today's update and outlook, I would like to just share a recommendation for the year. So we favor equities more as we are looking towards a recovery story for the year. And on that, more specifically, we are looking at the Wealth Equity Fund because it has a broader exposure to the Philippine equity market, as names that have not really done so well last year will be poised to make that bigger recovery this year. So it's nice to have that exposure to overall equities in the Philippine market. So that ends my update and outlook for today. Again, thank you for having me. Back to you, Tin.
Thank you, Ramon. As always, we emphasize the importance of diversification. Importanteng invested tayo sa iba't ibang klaseng investments. Dapat may bonds at may stocks sa investment portfolios natin. Being invested in bonds allows us to cushion the bleeding of the portfolio in case of downturns in the market. Having equities in our portfolio allow for our money to grow, especially during favorable market conditions. Since we've been talking about the local markets, here's a rundown of our local AXA funds. Wealth Bond Fund, invested in Philippine government bonds. Wealth Balanced Fund, invested in both local bonds and local equities. Wealth Equity Fund, invested in PSEI stocks or top 30 stocks in the Philippines. Chinese Tycoon Fund, invested in stocks owned by Filipino-Chinese businessmen. Spanish-American Legacy Fund, invested in stocks owned by Spanish and American businessmen. Opportunity Fund, invested in stocks in the Philippines, PSEI and non-PSEI stocks, meaning top 30 and non-top 30 stocks in the country. If you wish to know more about our funds on a deeper level, go to LMS and take the AXA Investment Funds online course. If you want a quick summary or description of our funds, you may go to the AXA website and refer to the fund highlight sheet. This is not to be confused with the fund fact sheets. Fund fact sheets are updated monthly because they show the performance of our funds. Fund highlight sheets remain the same all the time because they provide an overview about our funds. Let's take a look at some of the fund highlight sheets. Here, you can see the fund highlight sheet of the Wealth Equity Fund. In the fund focus portion, you can see where the fund is invested in. In the fund suitability portion, this provides insight as to kanino ba bagay or suitable yung fund na ito. Appropriate ba ito for our customer? Is it aligned with their goals, needs, and risk appetite? In the investment strategy portion, pinapakita yung allocations na pwede for the fund. Dito sa Wealth Equity Fund, 80 to 90% ang pwede ilagay ng fund managers sa equities. The remaining 0 to 10% ay pwede allot for cash and money market instruments. Siguro tinatanong nyo, bakit ganon? Bakit hindi 100% equities since equity fund naman ito? Kaya pwede maglagay ng mga up to 10% ang fund managers sa cash and money market instruments ay dahil para in case masyadong volatile yung market, may leeway sila or space na para i-park ang earnings from the equity investments. Kumbaga, ito yung pang-safekeep nila ng portion ng investment for the time being until they find viable equity investments. Sa bottom part ng fund highlight sheet, you'll see the risk profile portion, which shows how risky the fund is. Bilang 5 ang nakashade dito, it means ang ating wealth equity fund ay for customers or investors na may aggressive risk profile. Make sure to always consider this. Dapat naiintindihan ng investors natin kung ano yung risks na tinitake nila. And if they are indeed willing to take that amount of risk in order to possibly earn a high return. For those customers na mas conservative, that is absolutely okay. We have AXA funds for them that will suit their risk profile as well. In investments, walang one-size-fits-all. Customize lahat yan based on our clients' goals, needs, time horizon, and risk appetite. As distributors, it is our role to help them determine ano ba yung custom fit sa kanilang fund mix. Let's look at another example of a fund highlight sheet. This time, let's look at the JDAF Multi-Asset Peso Fund Highlight Sheet. Baka magulat kayo, pero for JDAF funds, 2 pages ang document na ito. Yung other AXA funds, 1 page lang. So we can see here, same lang yung first page. Notice here sa pagdating sa risk profile portion, 3 ang nakashade na number. Meaning, compared to Wealth Equity Fund na 5 yung risk profile score, the JDAF Multi-Asset Peso is for less aggressive investors. In page 2, we can see the definition of terms. Kumbaga, quick guide to some investments terms. Here, you'll be able to see the definitions of global aggregate bonds, global credit, Asian bonds, emerging market debts, global convertible, and investment grade. With the fund highlight sheets, it will be easier to present or describe the funds to our customers. Samahan mo na rin ng fund fact sheets for maximum effect. Investments always come with risks, and our customers would appreciate it if we could help them understand, navigate, and choose the custom-fit fund mix for them. And now it is time for our Mentimeter. Ready your phones, go to menti.com and type in the code that you will see on your screen.
Alright, so guys, please go to menti.com at ito po yung ating number na itatype, 3140607. Ayan, that's the code, no, para maka-access po tayo sa ating Mentimeter activity this morning. Ayan. Okay, so let's see if you guys are closely listening to our investment experts. Kaya naman, no, hindi na natin patatagalin pa. Let's go sa first question. Ayan. The first question ay, how do you feel about the local markets in 2021? Sige nga, let's see. All right, type in your answers. Type in your answers. Come on, guys. All right. You have a few more seconds to go to type in your answers. And syempre, dahil feelings yan, alam naman natin, lalong-lalo ngayon, February, no? Bumubuhos ng feelings. Medyo na yan, medyo hindi stable. Kaya parati natin itatanong itong question na to all throughout, no, ng ating Wednesday LGP session. Ayan, nako. Salamat for responding. Right now we have 55, 56. Okay, going up. Yung mga optimistic, ayos. No? Ibig sabihin yeah, meron tayong positive outlook when it comes to our local market. Yan. Merong neutral at may dalawang pessimistic. I wonder why. But thank you for sharing. Thank you so much for responding. Okay. So, punta tayo sa next question natin. The next question is this. Are there, kung naikinig talaga kayo are there corporate bonds in the wealth bond fund? Yes, no, or not sure? Come on. Go. Sige. Meron ba? Meron? O wala? Kung nakikinig talaga. Sige. Sabi nila, mabuti na yung black or white, yes or no. Huwag lang sa gitna kasi pag nasa gitna ka, mas alanganin, mas delikado. Kaya okay lang. Kung magkamali, sige, at least you learn, di ba? Sige, di natin patatagalin pa. Ang correct answer ay, syempre, okay, correct answer is no. Okay, or letter B. Okay. Wala po tayong corporate bonds sa wealth bond fund. Lahat po yan, puro government bonds. Okay? Clear? So yung mga nagkamali, okay lang yan. At least, alam nyo na. Punta tayo sa third question. Okay, let's go to the third question. Okay, the third question is this. Where can you find the fund highlight sheets? Sige nga. Saan ba yan? Sa AXA website, sa AXASOL, o sa EMA app? Go. Key in your answers. Yes. Okay. Aba, partner team, mukhang maraming nakikinig talaga sa ating session this morning, ano? Okay. Ayan. Okay. Di bale, may dalawang nagkamali, pero ayos lang. Majority, the answer is, syempre, yan ang tamang sagot. Yan ay makikita sa ating AXA website. Boom! 90% got the right answer. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for participating in today's Mentimeter. Now, kung tama ang inyong sagot, well, kudos. If mali, now you know. Okay? Again, this is Vince Lubiran, and back to you, partner team.
We've reached the end of today's broadcast. In this episode, we've been updated about the local bond and equity markets. We've also learned more about our funds through the fund highlight sheets. After this show, go ahead and call your prospective clients, update them on the local market trends, and of course, bring the fund highlight sheet and fund fact sheets to further help them make the most suitable investment decisions for them. If you want to know more about our funds and how you can further help your customers, you may refer to the LMS online modules and live virtual session schedules that we will be flashing on your screen. Your thoughts, opinions, and feedback matter. We want to know what you want to know. Please take time to answer our survey so that we may understand how we can help you better. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place. Once again, I'm Tin Militante, and this has been Investment News Live.